The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, we are days away from Team Canada starting its Olympic journey on Thursday to win a gold medal with NHL players back for the first time since 2014. They got to practicing yesterday. They practiced early this morning. We can go through all the different lines, but the biggest line that's at least percolating in my head, Macklin Celebrini, Connor McDavid, and Tom Wilson on that top line. Again, we can go through the lines as we wish, but what do you make of some of the different combinations and pairings you're seeing a couple days out from their first game?
Well, it's pretty interesting, that a team that hasn't seen a lot of turnover, relatively speaking, from the Four Nations roster, that you're starting off with two wingers that weren't part of that team. I think it tells you a couple things, Julian, that there's some lessons from that tournament. I think also Canada didn't really find, I'd say, combos that, you take to the bank in that tournament. It's not to say all the lines were bad, and I'm definitely not critiquing when you win, you win. But, keep in mind, as you mentioned, this is the first Olympics in 12 years for NHL players. The best Canadian players of this generation have only been gathered once, and it was at that Four Nations tournament, and they played 4 games, right? It wasn't a long sample of time to be together. And so I still think, kind of as a country with this version of Team Canada, the coaching staff is still getting, some ideas about what the best grouping of those players are. Now, I'm not surprised to see Macklin Celebrini inside the top 6. That if you had told me that before we saw these lines, I would have said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Probably wouldn't have guessed Tom Wilson would be on the right side of the top line. But, the more I've thought on it, I do think it makes some sense. Obviously, you're not looking for 3 players who do the same thing. You're looking for players with, complementary skill sets and attributes that can find a way to work well together. And, Connor McDavid is used to having a player that goes and gets it on the forecheck, wins pucks back, and can, bang goals home from around the crease. I mean, that's what Zach Hyman has sort of functionally fulfilled on his wing the last number of seasons in Edmonton. I think that Tom Wilson can bring an element of that. And probably before we go too deep into this conversation, I should state the obvious. There's going to be some changes. This isn't written in stone. I mean, even the fact Canada's probably, they've got 2 practices under their belt already, with the first game being on Thursday. They're going to get, I would think, 2 more practices. Maybe 1 more practice and a morning skate before Thursday's game. Point being, there's a fair bit of runway before they launch into the tournament. And then based on what happens with performance and how things look once the games are actually being played, I think you're going to see, we're going to end at a different place than we start, but it really is an interesting place to start. And I think it does give us a mindset into what the coaches are thinking.
I'll give them this, though. With that top line, obviously you're getting the speed and the prowess of Connor McDavid. Seeing Macklin Celebrini, who's had an amazing year to this point, get that opportunity on that top line. That aggression from Tom Wilson, I could see that line creating a lot of problems. I don't know how many wrong answers you can do with the collection of players you have if you're Team Canada, but I do see the vision. Yeah,
for sure. And look, Tom Wilson's a really good skater for a big man too. I think that line is going to be fast. And, one of the other takeaways I know that Canada had from the Four Nations tournament, Julian, was that the games themselves were played at such a high rate of speed that you can't lean on any of your players the way you might in an NHL game, just in terms of total minutes. And so, clearly the focus as we go through this lineup with the way they've put it on paper to begin is about spreading the talent even, I think, more evenly throughout the lineup, because this is going to be a 4-line tournament. The games at the Four Nations didn't feature many penalties at all. So you didn't even have a lot of specialty teams play. There was long stretches at 5-on-5, far longer than you would see in a typical NHL game, I'd say. And then the pace, because the quality of the tournament is so high, even the elite players that dot Team Canada's, forward roster, you've got to be smart about how you use them. And I think, that's why you see Sidney Crosby not playing with Nathan McKinnon and lining up as the 3rd-line center to start. And so you're making decisions about, what's best for Connor McDavid, but you're also making decisions about how do we best distribute the talent through this lineup so that we can make lines that make a lot of sense. And let's face it, Canada, if things don't go well for that first line, maybe you see Mitch Marner back, on the right side of Connor McDavid, or Mark Stone could be bumped there. I know he's playing left wing to start right now as a right shot. I mean, there are other options that could be in that position. I mean, even Nick Suzuki, who's being shifted over from center to start the tournament, could maybe see time there. I mean, I think that's the point. Is you're right. We could probably at random just draw names out of a hat. If we did like a left wing pile, center pile, and a right wing pile, and just at random pulled them out of the hat, it's probably a pretty good lineup, I would say. But, these decisions are important. And I do think that there's a real desire to find at least a couple lines you feel really good about if you're John Cooper. And having that be the lines with your best centerman on it makes sense. I mean, what sets Canada apart from most of the competition in this tournament is you can go McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby down the middle of your top three lines. I mean, there are other teams that are better at aspects of the game or that we might say have more skill on paper and aspects of the game than Canada. That's where Canada is elite. I mean, the other countries do not have centers of that quality, of that skill level, of just current status. I mean, I say this with a lot of respect. I think Czechia is a dangerous first opponent for Canada. Right now, they have David Kampf as their second line center. So, he's not even the second line center in Vancouver normally. And Canada's going, McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby. So, again, you don't win the game on paper by any means. Right now, we've basically seen what John Cooper's come up with on his napkin. He's put it into practice with a couple practices, but even that's still the early stages. I mean, most of the Canadian players only arrived in Milan on Sunday. They skated on Sunday night, and then they had a closed practice on Monday morning. I mean, it's really only just getting real for them. But it's kind of crazy too, because I'm saying all this, and then I also know Canada plays Thursday, Friday, Sunday to start the tournament. Yeah. So, I haven't asked anyone, but it's fair to say Saturday is not going to be a day they practice with the 3 and 4 to start the tournament. So there isn't a lot of adjustment time after you get going, other than in-game adjustments too. So, each practice is important in terms of setting a foundation for the team.
By the way, before I get to defense pairings, just to read out the rest of the forwards that we saw on Sunday: Marner, Crosby, Stone, which could be an all-time shutdown line if used in that. Of course, they'll be used in that way for some degree, but
good luck getting the puck.
Yeah, exactly. With those three being put together, Marchand, McKinnon, and Nick Suzuki. I'm not used to seeing Nick Suzuki play a position other than center, but that's what happens when you play on Team Canada. If you're a center, be prepared to play the wing. There's the embarrassment of riches at the center position. You also, of course, had Brandon Hagel, Sam Bennett, Bo Horvat, Sam Reinhart, Seth Jarvis in the fold too. I'm really intrigued by that Marner, Crosby, Stone line. That's a really good line.
Yeah, and not a line with what you would call speed, at least at the level that we're talking this tournament at. I mean, that's almost like it's like mixing in an off-speed pitch with your fastball, if you think of it in baseball terms. But by no means am I taking anything away from those guys. I mean, they're all excellent puck possession players, especially with Stone and Crosby, guys that are known for winning puck battles along the boards and controlling things down low and in the offensive zone. Marner's got a great mind for both playmaking, but even, being in the right spots defensively. You can see the logic in that. And, it's kind of fascinating. I saw a lot of people throwing their lines out, and I didn't do mine, but had I thrown mine out, it wouldn't have been what they came up with. Kind of my point is that the coaching staff, I think, came up with a rotation here that I don't, with the forward specifically. I think the defense was a little more predictable, but that I didn't see anyone call, and maybe again, it's just a place to start, and they've got some backup moves in their pocket. I mean, and the obvious one would be Crosby, say moving to the wing beside McKinnon, which we saw, at the Four Nations, or even have Crosby to be the center on that line with McKinnon's speed up the right wing. I mean, that could be pretty tantalizing too. You could move Suzuki back to center, maybe with the third line if you're moving things around. So, I mean, John Cooper's got more, I think coaches around the hockey world could be jealous of the options he has there. He's not boxed in any position or with any particular player, I don't believe. And frankly, right now it's possible the reigning Conn Smythe Trophy winner would be scratched for game one for Canada. I mean, it's at least a possibility. So, it's sort of like how PK Subban was scratched in 2014 when he was a Norris Trophy winner for Canada. I mean, that's just kind of the reality of what this exercise and this type of tournament can be. And that being said, having lots of extra players who aren't playing doesn't give you an advantage. I mean, it gives you options if things don't go well, or if you encounter injuries along the way, or whatever it may be. But there's still a lot of pressure to deliver results when you have a team like this.
Braden Point, obviously not on this roster because he's injured, so he's not on the team. Who do you think on this roster could best replace his skill set, particularly a guy who's been able to play in these big moments for Tampa in the postseason? But just with the way this lineup looks, like, who do you think could replace what he brings to a team?
I think Suzuki might be actually the closest comparable. Just from, I'm thinking right shot, a player that plays center in the NHL but can play the wing at a tournament like this. We haven't seen Suzuki score 50 goals in the NHL the way Point did, so I'm not saying it's a 1-for-1 flip. They added Seth Jarvis when Point was knocked out. He's also a right shot and I think can fill some of the same roles on the roster, although again, you're not getting as great as those other guys are. I mean, Braden Point, who frankly wasn't having the best season to start the year. I think he'd come on a lot lately. Unfortunately, it had a really strong run through December and into January before going down with his injury. But he was one of the first 6 players named to Canada last June. So, I mean, this is a pretty special guy. And, I don't know that clearly they went, like, if they were just looking for another player that could bring offensive ability, I mean, maybe Connor Bedard gets that call, when they went there. I mean, I think that Canada's looking to maximize kind of the versatility with the lineup with how they've slotted, especially the forwards. I mean, that's the spot where I think it is an embarrassment of riches for Team Canada compared to the other countries at this tournament. But we'll just have to see how things shake out. It's so funny because we can think on this and like, yeah, you try to imagine it, and then you're going to see that first game, and then there's going to be a second game back to back. It's crazy how quickly this tournament's going to go after all the buildup.
We could speed through defense. Taze, Makar, Morrissey, Parayko, Sanheim, Theodore, Harley, and Doughty playing together. Unless you want to add a thought, because I do want to go to goaltending. Any thoughts on who will likely be the star? Probably will end up being Jordan Binnington, but we've seen Canada at these tournaments before start with one guy and then end with a completely different player. So I'm not going to lose my mind over whoever starts game 1 for Team Canada.
I would be shocked if it isn't Jordan Binnington for game 1. That's just me. I think that you give him the net against Czechia, no matter what, you're playing another goalie on Friday. Probably Logan Thompson, although everything I've heard, lots of people who know goaltending better than I do say Darcy Kemper might actually be Canada's best option behind a team that plays as predictably as you can expect a team to. So, kind of interesting choice. You're right. And one of the issues, I'd say all the countries, like the US has 3 guys that could start for them, right? But you don't necessarily get the benefit of that in this tournament. First of all, only one is in the goal at the time. And, they actually have arguably a weaker pool than Canada. Like, I don't even know what the U.S. will necessarily learn from those pool games when it comes to goaltending. I mean, at least for Canada, you're throwing it in against countries that have won, been on the podium at recent men's world championships. We'll probably test those guys a little bit. And so, I think you can make a more of an informed decision in terms of who's in the best form based on those games. But, some of this will be gut feel. And for anyone who isn't familiar with the tournament format, if a team wins the group stage, after 3 round robin games, you jump right to the quarterfinals. There's everyone else. There's an opportunity to go to a qualification round. And so, Canada could play 6 games if they get to the gold medal game, but they could also play 7. But the point is, it's not a lot of time to make that call. And so, I think you start Binnington, then Thompson, and sort of just see where you're at. I don't know that you need to commit more than that. And you're right. We've seen Canada win gold medals in 2002 and 2010, where the goalie that started game 1, Curtis Joseph in 2002 and Martin Brodeur in 2010, wasn't the goalie that was in when they won the gold medal, a week and a half later.
By the way, we should mention for those who don't know, you can dress 13 forwards and 7D at this tournament. I know looking at some of the line combos for some of the different teams, some people were already ready to bring out pitchforks just to see certain guys in and out of lineups. So something very important to bring up.
I would say that's difficult in and of itself, though, too, because, the whoever the 13th forward and 7th D is for any of these teams, frankly, but especially Canada and the US, but even Sweden, the same deal. Like, those are frontline players in the NHL, right? And I was actually reading an old game story the other day that I wrote in Sochi. I didn't remember this, but Martin St. Louis actually didn't get a shift in the quarterfinals despite being dressed for Canada against Latvia. That was that crazy 2-1 game Canada won where Kristers Godlevskis made 55 saves.
I remember.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to forget. I was in the building, very, very tense, obviously, because of it almost became comical, like how crazy the goaltending performance was. But in that game, Mike Babcock didn't play his 13th forward, even for a shift. And so I'm not saying that will always be the case. I think that's an extreme example, but the 7th D and the 13th forward might get 4 minutes of ice time in a game or something like that. And similarly, if a defenseman goes down, all of a sudden that 7th D is out there on a regular pairing. So you kind of have to stay ready too. Little unique quirk to international hockey, but I think this is what the challenge is for all the top teams is you're really trying to, you're pushing players primarily into roles they don't normally fill. And you got to keep everyone engaged and involved and ready to have a breakthrough moment, because based on past experiences at these events, it's a lot of low scoring games typically. I mean, there's exceptions. There was a 7-3 Canada-Russia game I remember in Vancouver in the quarters. But it's also really, if you look at it, it's more 2-1, 3-2 type of games. So that means that you got to stick with it sometimes. I mean, it's not a score fest, trade chances type of matchup. And, as you're working players into the rotation, like, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but it's like triple overtime Edmonton Cup final way back in the day. What was the player's name? I'm drawing a blank.
Are you thinking of the, not triple, but like what, the 1991, like Peter Klima?
Peter Klima. I think it was like his second shift of overtime in the third overtime. He scored that goal. I mean, it sounds weird, but it could be someone in a way down the lineup that has a big moment like that isn't getting a lot of ice time. So, the Olympics in a lot of ways is taking players outside of what they're used to. I mean, if you've seen any of the sort of footage from the Olympic Village, it's not to the typical quarters, which doesn't make it a bad thing. I think it's what makes it unique and cool too. But, players that are really routine oriented are going to have to get used to being out of their routine at this tournament. Even the start times of the games are all over the place.
Stay ready so you don't have to be ready. That's going to have to be the motto for so many people at this tournament.
Yeah. And, I was in Canada's first meeting back at the summer orientation camp that they had, with the men's team, the women's team, and the Paralympic team. And literally the first message was basically they think the team that doesn't complain, that doesn't focus on what isn't exactly the way you would want it if you controlled everything, that basically kind of gets comfortable in the environment is going to have the most success, which makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, they were saying in that meeting that they think other people, and they weren't pointing at any particular opponent, but they're saying other people are going to waste energy focusing on, maybe the food not being perfect or the bed not being exactly what you want, or, all these types of things. And I thought that was interesting that was how they started the tone to that meeting in late August. And now that the players have been on the ground for, 36 hours, I'm sure a lot of them are getting a taste of that. Like, okay, this isn't exactly the way we prepare for a Stanley Cup playoff game or even a big regular season game in the NHL. But, how can we be at our best? How can we be ready to perform when the lights go on?
If you were talented enough to play on Team Canada or Team USA or any of these teams,
no danger of that.
Would you rather have the full Olympic experience and be in the Olympic Village, like what Team USA seems to be doing, as the Kachuk brothers were saying? Or would you rather, if given the option, stay in a spot separate from all of that?
I think I'd opt for what Canada has, which is both, right? The Canadian athletes have rooms in the Olympic Village and they have rooms in a hotel together. And, and they're very close together in terms of where they are in the city. They can stay at either or depending on the night. I think that might actually be the best format. I realize that's it sounds like it's an on the fence answer, but I just think
it's a very middle of the road answer.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is if it's the night before a game, you might want to have a better sleep, right? And you're probably going to sleep better in your own room. Maybe not necessarily, but just probably. Maybe the person beside you snoring or makes noise. Like, who knows? It's just like, it's not, if you're not used to it. I also think it's important to be in the village and be around the other athletes too. So I think that's probably the setup that Canada has. I think makes a lot of sense. The other benefit for Canada of having that hotel is they have meeting space there. They have, common areas where the players can hang out together and do things. It's not quite the same. You don't have the same control of that at the Olympic Village, where obviously there's, at this games in particular in Milan, there's speed skaters, there's figure skaters, there's athletes in other disciplines. It's not like there's just like meeting rooms galore, right? And I think an important part of preparation for these games is the pre-scout that Canada is going to do. And similarly for the other countries, you're talking about 25 players on the roster plus coaching staff. I think it's, in terms of pure preparation, I think it's good that they have both, frankly. I'm not as familiar with the US setup. I don't know if those players, because NHLPA does provide NHL players with a hotel room. Some players give it to family members or friends or someone coming over, but I don't know if the US is doing something similar, which is sort of a hybrid between the village and the hotel, like Canada is planning to do. But, look, it's, the stakes are so high on these games. Like at the end of the day, I think whatever can get you in the best frame to compete. And this is the same for a slope style skier. Canada won a bronze this morning. Way to go, Megan Oldham. Or if you're a figure skater or a speed skater, like the Olympics bring a challenge, because the Olympics itself is not centered around your event. If you go to a speed skating world championship, it's tailored in a way that can maximize performance for a speed skater. The Olympics, by their nature, the schedules are all over the place. You might not have much control over the food and all that stuff. I think what Canada's tried to do is control a little bit more that they can by having that hotel option on the side.
Limiting all those distractions in the athletes' village.
I don't know if it's distractions. I mean, I think it's about being able, hockey is, and here's the thing. I'm sure all sports are like this now. I just don't cover other sports, so I'm not as familiar, but these guys tend to eat specific things at certain times. There's a lot of sort of science that goes into how they fuel themselves, how they prepare for games. I mean, even Connor McDavid came over a little early to Milan after Edmonton's season ended, or season pause, before the break to start getting acclimatized. I think that anything you can do to try to control your surroundings, it's not necessarily just distractions. I think it's about fueling and sleeping and everything else to be ready for the games is critical.
Before I get to Team USA, did you read Connor McDavid's Players Tribune piece from a couple days ago? I actually thought that was really engaging. I thought that was really cool. I have my thoughts on Players Tribune as a whole. Good publication, just maybe a little self-serving to the athletes a little bit more. I mean, it's designed to do that, but I don't know. I feel like over time it's been a little bit more PR in the last how many years, but I did enjoy reading Connor McDavid just obviously describing the need to win, particularly at the Olympics. I liked it.
Yeah, I thought honestly, it would be great if you're an Oilers fan too. I mean, it's a window into a guy that doesn't always let you in, as when you see him on camera or in scrum settings in a dressing room, and kind of a window into what makes him tick. Even the detail of having to go on his bachelor party a couple days after Edmonton's first cup loss, the Game 7 loss they had in 2024. And, it rained and their golf game got canceled. And he's like, I didn't even want to sit there and drink beers with my buddies. He was so miserable.
So sad.
Didn't want to play. I mean, you're right. It is sad, but I think it's an interesting window into the guy, right? I mean, the only way you become as good at anything as he is through obsession, frankly. There's got to be God-given ability in there too, but I mean, he's also coaxed every ounce of performance out of his body, out of his mind, to become, a guy that just looks different, frankly, on the ice than any other hockey player. I don't think, one of the coolest things for me about Connor McDavid is you don't need to be an expert at hockey. If you just watch the game, your eyes would be trained on him. He would stand out, even in a tournament like this, he's going to look faster than the other guys. He's going to look different, the way he moves around the ice. So yeah, explaining what it means. When I think back to Julian, what is one thing Connor McDavid was pretty open about over the last number of years is wanting to be at the Olympics, right? I mean, you haven't seen him really champion any causes publicly except that one. He was, quite forceful about it on a number of occasions, and good for him. I think it's great. One of the main reasons this tournament's happening, quite frankly, is the NHLPA, with the voices and the support of people like Connor McDavid, pushed for this in collective bargaining and really made it a priority in their latest round of negotiations with the owners in the league. So, he's wanted this. He's kind of one of the players that's really manifested this tournament happening. And I'm not saying it's him alone, but he hasn't shied away from the fact that he grew up, watching the Golden Goal, right? And even remembers 2002 a little bit, which was Canada's first men's gold in 50 years. I remember that very well. It was a big deal in Canada.
Massive,
like a huge deal. Like the country stopped and people were honking their horns and like from across a huge, vast swath of land, because it united people in a certain way. So he wants to be part of something like that. And the stakes are very high. And even him pointing out that he hadn't won anything from the 2016 World Championship where he represented Canada to, that Four Nations tournament. You think of the best hockey player in the world. He went 9 years where his team, they won lots of games and stuff. They had successes in there, but they didn't have the ultimate success and what that meant to him. And so, yeah, I thought reading that, it's pretty easy to get a better sense for Connor, but also get excited for what this tournament represents for players from all nations. You don't think those U.S. guys aren't pretty fired up? All they've heard about is the Miracle on Ice for a long time. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. In fact, I would recommend the Miracle documentary that's just come out on Netflix.
I'm adding that to my list.
If you haven't seen it, lots of cool footage there. Lots of background that I didn't maybe realize as much about in terms of what was going on in the world and why it made that tournament particularly resonate. Even though hockey, especially in 1980, wasn't a sport of much concern in the U.S., but that team really connected with people. But, they want to author their own kind of moment like that. It won't be a miracle, of course, if the U.S. men win gold in Milan, but it will be a huge achievement. And, the same can be said for the Swedes or the Finns or, even the Swiss and the Czechs are arriving at this tournament thinking they got a chance. And so, it's going to be a pretty compelling event.
CJ, I forgot to mention during the beginning of the show, because I wanted to make the point off the top, but you look good. I really like this sweater that you're wearing, man. I don't notice you wearing quarter zips all that much. But this is a good look on you.
I couldn't resist, man. Mac Weldon stuff. Sick. Honestly, my shopping is done for the year. I went on the website and I wanted one of everything, and I ordered pretty much one of everything. And I'm got to say, this is a comfortable shirt.
I got to say, great look for you. I am in love with this long sleeve polo I also got from Mac Weldon. Feel like we got some telepathy on that.
Good stuff. As I said, I couldn't stop once I started filling up my bin there.
Our pieces are from the Ace collection. These feel extremely comfortable. I love the feel. I love the fit on mine. The fit obviously looks really good on CJ. And if you want in on some of these Mac Weldon pieces, you should take advantage of that collection too. Mac Weldon's Ace collection, comfortable anywhere. Go to macweldon.com and get 20% off of your first order of $125 or more with the promo code CJ. It's literally 2 letters. It's literally what we call this man here, CJ.
And I dare you to stop at one shirt. Oh. You're getting more than one.
Oh, you are definitely getting more than one. That is MacWeldon.com with the promo code.
Anything jump out to you on the American lineup? Just going off lines from Michael Russo on Monday morning. The Kachuk brothers with Jack Eichel in the middle, Jake Gensel, Matt Boldy with Captain Austin Matthews in the middle, Kyle Connor, Dylan Larkin, Tage Thompson. That's a line. JT Miller, Brock Nelson, Vincent Trocheck with Jack Hughes coming in and out, and then you have Clayton Keller as an extra forward as well. Hughes and McAvoy. We'll get to Charlie McAvoy in a second. Jacob Slavin, Brock Faber, I should say, sorry. Noah Hannafin, Zach Werenski, and then you have Sanderson and Lacombe together. Anything jump out to you with what the Americans are putting together?
Well, what stands out to me when I look at that is there's a ton of firepower in that lineup, even for all the discussion of the players left at home, whether you're focused on Jason Robertson or Cole Caulfield. I'll stick to the forwards just for the purpose of my comment. If Clayton Keller can't get in the lineup, at least to start, it doesn't look like. It's tough to find room for all the shooters that they left home. And again, I'm not necessarily backing those decisions, but when you see it written out, I can be like, okay, I can see where some of the push and pull come from. Now, I suppose you say just throw them on a fourth line and replace some of the more traditional checkers or 200-foot players that don't have that ceiling. But I can understand where the decision was tough. Boldy has 32 goals this year, and he's playing with Matthews, who's, even in an off season is still a dangerous shooter, and Gensel, who scores a bunch of goals. I mean, Eichel and the Kachucks is an interesting line. The U.S. they've earned the kind of hype that's accompanied their arrival at this tournament. I mean, they absolutely have a team that can win. Adding Quinn Hughes to the Four Nations team as well, right? Charlie McAvoy is able to play in this tournament, thankfully, but he didn't finish the Four Nations, of course, after that shoulder injury and then
with the
infection that he developed at that time. So, that was a really top end Four Nations team, arguably the best team at that tournament, just in how it played. Even though it fell 1 goal short in the final, and I think they can feel like they've arrived here with a little bit more firepower. So it's going to be quite a treat when we get, especially to the elimination portion. I mean, I'm excited for all the games. Frankly, you want to get a sense of where everyone's at. There's probably going to be a bit of a feeling out there for the teams in the early stages of the round robin games, but by early next week, we're into the must wins, and you're going to get the powers playing each other in some format, right? It's going to be a Canada or US or Sweden, US, or, we're not that far off seeing those games in the States. Hockey played on those stakes is crazy. It's like jumping right into a game 7 with, I think the NHL sent over like $3 billion worth of players. It's nuts.
By the way, before we go to Charlie McAvoy, some quotes coming in from USA's practice. Matthew Tkachuk on his teammate from the Florida Panthers, Sam Bennett, replacing injured forward Anthony Cirelli for Canada at the Olympics. Really good player, definitely an upgrade for their team. I like that for Matthew Tkachuk. It's even abroad, where you're repping a completely different team, the Florida-Tampa rivalry still burns.
I mean, they got to put it on hold. Once upon a time, I don't think this matters as much, but one of the Canada Cup teams in the 80s, there was such a rivalry at that time between the Oilers and the Islanders. Like, they actually had to set it apart when they got to the Canada Cup setting, because, they played each other in back-to-back cup finals, and the players didn't like each other. I wonder if there's any aspect of that at this tournament. I would think there could be. Brandon Hagel seems to either get concussed or in a fight every time he plays the Panthers. And now he's sharing a room with Sam Bennett, right? I mean, it wasn't that long ago. It was Bennett and Marchand that had to kind of make peace after what had happened for them in a playoff series with Florida and Boston. And then they were teammates last year at the Four Nations, buried the hatchet there, and of course just won a Stanley Cup together in June. So, I mean, it's probably a little more normal in today's NHL where players move around a bit more. And, I don't know that the lines are as black and white as they could have been in the past in terms of fraternizing with players from other teams and all that sort of stuff. But, it's definitely an undercurrent to what's going on.
Anything else you wanted to mention from some of the other teams at the Olympics before I go to Charlie McAvoy?
No, let's go to Charlie. I mean, I think we'll still have lots of time to jump in once we see some games here later in the week.
What did you think of his post on social media a couple days ago? For context, we did mention on the last episode, he took a pretty big hit against the Florida Panthers from Sandusville Manis, pretty high up. No discipline administered post-game anyway. But Charlie McAvoy taking video of that incident, putting it on social media, putting a photo of him and his obviously busted face after that incident. Look, a lot of people like to complain about the Department of Player Safety and the job that they do. It's easy for us to go out on social media and podcasts to say it. It's a whole other thing if you're a player who's a victim of a tough hit like that, and that's the statement you make. I kind of like it from Charlie McAvoy, considering how inconsistent the DOPS can be. I kind of like that move, even if he could just put that out there and just be like, hey, it speaks for itself. What did you think of it?
Well, that's the way you're going to do it unless you want to pay a fine, right?
Yeah.
If you come out and make verbal accusations or get too personal about one of those decisions, I think you're basically in a window where the NHL's likely going to come down on you. And so, perfect the way he did it in terms of we're still talking about it. He drew attention to it. I think it's pretty clear how he feels, but I'm interpreting that based on what he tweeted. And he might just tell you, hey, I just was showing you the hit and the outcome of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
just showing a highlight.
Like, I don't think there's anything there for him that's going to warrant, any discipline or anything like that. He made his point. And let's keep in mind too, McAvoy's had a brutal run of injuries. I mean, we mentioned the Four Nations, but he also broke his jaw earlier this year, took a shot in the face, has been playing with a bubble. He's going to play at the Olympics now with a bubble. And he said he feels like he's back to square one after taking that hit in the jaw. And you saw the swelling and the puffing up of his face.
Brutal.
Don't know what his eating situation is, but that's always one of the issues when you have jaw issues, is that it's hard to fuel your body the way you'd want to. As fate would have it, what are the odds US and Latvia play the first game at the tournament together? So he's going to see Vilmanis again. Now, I don't think, by no means am I suggesting there'll be retribution. I don't think any of that will play into the dynamic, but it's still kind of crazy. These guys are playing each other again after that last meeting. I should mention this, Julian, because people might not realize, but George Peros, the head of Department of Player Safety, is involved in discipline if that comes into play at the Olympics. So, even the Department of Player Safety, in essence, has followed McAvoy and Vilmanis over to Milan, because if there's any review to be done or a hit or a play that might be suspendable, George Peros has a big say in whether that's what that looks like.
All right. We'll just have to wait and see how that plays out with George Peros. And I'm looking forward to USA Latvia. And I know there might not be any retribution, but there's a small part of me that will take a look every time we potentially see McAvoy versus Vilmanis on the ice.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should watch the next Panthers-Bruins game a little closer. That might be a different situation, but I just think there's too much on the line. And we should mention too, like, it's very unusual, but there's NHL referees with European referees and also linesmen at this tournament. And I don't think a lot of other, like, FIBA doesn't do that. That FIBA doesn't bring over NBA refs, for example, when it gets to the Olympics. And so, how the style of these games will be handled is interesting. The European officials did come over for a training camp in the summer with the NHL refs in Buffalo. So they have worked together. I think that there's an idea of, it's not like everyone's just meeting each other and going right into these games, but, penalties and things of that nature could have a big bearing on the tournament. Right. And so, that's the other aspect. If you're Sam Bennett or even a Kachuk or Tom Wilson, Brad Marchand, like, you have to make sure you're staying on the right side of the line. And there's definitely no time to get into anything personal in a setting like this, but also, even a dangerous hit. We've seen in the past that sometimes a hit that's more acceptable in North America gets judged a little more harshly under IIHF rules. I'm not saying that'll be the case, because there are NHL referees in this tournament, but there's also European officials as well. So I think that's a subplot to think about here as we get into the first games that matter.
Absolutely. And with that, it is time for questions. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions throughout social media for Ask CJ, as we do to start off every week with this show. CJ, first question for you from Colin. What is your favorite non-hockey Olympic sport to watch?
Ooh. Winter Games, do you think? Or
that's a good question. They did not specify winter or summer games.
Because summer games, I really like the running events. Like Summer Games, I love watching anything from the marathon down to, even the 10K race, the 5,000 meters, even 100 meters. I mean, that's probably my favorite overall. Watch some curling to start this Olympics. Mm-hmm. I can enjoy me some, especially, it's nice with the time zones here. You get some pretty early morning curling on. You got a coffee, like a nice curling is like not a high pace sport, but I enjoy watching that. But honestly, I think one of the magical parts of the Olympics is I watched women's slopestyle this morning because it was on TV. It turned out a Canadian won the bronze, but found myself getting into it. Like I find that all these sports that I don't have any sort of working knowledge even of all the rules, that anything can draw me in. I think that's the beauty of the Olympics. And, especially being back home here to be able to watch the Canadian coverage versus when you're at the event, you kind of don't have a sense of what's going on outside whatever bubble you're in. Literally every morning, I'm just watching whatever's on and I'm open to any sport. I mean, you put it on that level and that stage and everything's interesting in my eyes.
Depending on what Olympics you're at, like I presume in your hotel, whatever you turn on, whatever the home country's television network is, like that's the feed you're watching off of for an Olympic Games for what's going on?
To be honest, I've only been to 2 Olympics as a reporter, Vancouver and Sochi, and I'm not kidding. You're never in your hotel. Like you work,
Right.
You work 18 hours a day and you sleep 6. Like, I mean, and it doesn't feel like work. I mean, you talk about like the best natural high of your life. Being at the Olympics is unbelievable. I think if you're selling popcorn at the Olympics, you're probably like a weird, you just feel like very proud of anyone who's positively impacted your life and allowed you to get there. So, you know, I didn't watch anything at any of those games. Like I watched a whole bunch of hockey, went to practices and turned out stories and everything. And it was awesome. Greatest experiences professionally in my life. But, there's not a lot of spectating or viewing to be done if you're in that whirlwind.
Do you have FOMO? We know why you're not at this year's games, but do you have FOMO seeing your colleagues at the games?
Definitely some FOMO. I mean, you know, just because I can visualize what it's like. I mean, especially the first day of practices there. Like, it's so cool when the teams finally get on the ice for the first time and you see who's playing with whom and you're interpreting all that. You get to talk to everyone. Like, you know, it's a pretty special environment. I mean, I'm grateful to be standing where my feet are right now too, on the precipice of becoming a father for the first time. But, yeah, definitely. I mean, the Olympics is it for me. I mean, if I could only cover one more event of my choosing for the rest of my life, it would be an Olympic hockey tournament. That would be my choice, even though I've been to a couple already. So, of course, part of me wants to be there, but more important things going on at home.
How's the car seat, by the way? We talked
car
about
seat is fully installed. It was never in doubt. You know, I don't want to brag, but in a world where you have YouTube, it was built up as being harder than, you know, I think it was. Now, it took me some time. You clearly want to make sure you're doing it properly.
Yes.
And you know, I have since watched the video about how you actually put an infant in the seat. And that's not if you've never done it before, it's not as intuitive as you might think. And I've been practicing on a Cabbage Patch doll. So I'm not saying I'm an expert, but since our last recording last Thursday in Toronto, I've come leaps and bounds in my car seat preparation and knowledge, my friend.
Proud of you.
I got a lot of messages from the 100%ers. Like, where's the car seat? Like, people were like, they wanted proof of it. So I did post something on my Instagram.
Yeah, I'm sure someone on Discord or maybe Blue Sky was asking about the car seat. So I had to make sure that question got in.
Let me tell you, the list of things I don't know beyond the car seat is long. So it's going to be a learning experience here the next, well, few dozen decades probably, but definitely the next few weeks.
We're proud of you, CJ. We're really proud of you. We hope nothing but the best for this week.
Thanks, pal.
With the new one. From Matt, Nick Suzuki has a clear shot at tournament MVP. Agree or disagree? A clear shot at tournament MVP.
Anyone who plays on the team that's favored to win gold probably has a clear, like anyone he's in the top 6 on Canada. So I would say he's probably no higher than 5th on my list of Canadians that I would say would be favored to win the MVP. But I mean, I can't say it's not going to happen. If he has a big tournament, sure. So this is not meant as shade at Suzuki, but it's a weird leap of logic to be like, he has a clear shot. Well, I mean, he's playing for the team that is favored to win, which doesn't mean they're going to win. And he's got a role there. So yeah, if he's puts up some points and has some big games, I mean, I don't even know who won the MVP at the previous ones, to be honest. That's the other thing. I don't think the MVP matters as much as the gold medal.
No. I do wonder if Matt was hoping for you to be full on board with saying Nick Suzuki would be the guy, but hopefully this answer was satisfactory anyway.
Well, look, Suzuki is another new player that's in the top 6. That's another interesting development we didn't explore specifically, but you know, it's kind of intriguing how John Cooper's using some of the guys that weren't at his disposal last year in Montreal and Boston.
Yes, exactly. From Tuto TNG, do you think a couple NHL trade questions, obviously, since there is a roster freeze, English. Since even though there is a roster freeze, fans are still wondering what their teams will do once that freeze thaws. Do you think Owen Tippett would be made available in a trade?
It's a
for Philly?
question. I don't think Philadelphia has fully landed on their direction yet. And, look, they're not in a spot where they feel they have to trade anyone. I do know that they want to be growing the roster up, but it's been a tumultuous couple weeks leading into the break. I actually think, reflecting on the teams, there might not be many NHL teams that could benefit more from the break than Philadelphia, probably just with some of the smoke billowing around them. Other teams, I might say the same thing, who have a pile of injuries. It's just an opportunity to rest some bodies and minds and everything. But, I don't know yet what way Philadelphia is going to go. And I don't think they know which way they're going to go at this deadline. Not suggesting they're going to become a big buyer, but to what degree do they sell? What do they consider? I'd be surprised if we're talking about Tippett being moved by the deadline, but I also can't rule it out entirely because, I do think they have to, clearly part of the reaction to everything that's gone on is the expectations are up and they have to find a way to take steps forward as an organization. And so sometimes to do that, you have to consider moving out players that have been pretty productive for you too.
Jimmy has a Senator's question for you, if that's okay. Since
I don't get an option, man. You just ask him. I answer him as best I can.
Since we all know Ottawa Senators GM Steve Staios has been studying, evaluating, monitoring, keeping a close eye on the market, could you clarify who or what he's been mulling over so seriously and how he hopes to improve his roster, please? He added a please to this question.
Well, what's your answer to that? I mean, you're much closer.
I think they need a right shot defenseman for that top four. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's who they were targeting. They could probably use another depth winger for scoring. Those have been like the two biggest things that this team has needed on that front.
Problem with a right shot defenseman, when I'm not ruling them out, but that's an expensive acquisition usually.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, we've talked in these parts where I live here in Toronto about the Leafs and overpaying for Brandon Carlo. Well, what was Brandon Carlo? A right shot defenseman who had 2 years beyond that on his contract. That's what made him so appealing to the Leafs. They gave up a first round pick that could become pretty high pick this year in Fraser Minton. So, the early scoring of that trade does not look good from the Leafs end, but the part of the reason they got there in terms of what they gave up is that it's hard to get right shot Ds that make a difference. So, be interesting to see if Ottawa can get that done. Obviously they don't own the first round pick in 2026. Now, nothing to say you can't trade the first in 2027, especially if you're getting a player maybe that's going to be around for a little while. It's not just a rental situation, but, I'm not going to sit here and apologize for the GMs, but I do think it's a tough league at times to make deals in. And Steve Staios, I think he probably feels pretty good about that Cousins move. He made it last year's deadline. That one wasn't widely rumored either. So maybe all this time that you're growing frustrated, he's working on something a little bigger to drop before March 6th.
I think just like last year is probably working in stealth mode. But yeah, this year will be a bit of a challenge since you don't have the first round pick coming this summer and not too many assets. It seems like you either have or want to move. Like it's been said throughout the year that Carter Yakubchuk, their top prospect, probably isn't going to be available in these trades. So, I mean, things could change, but I'd be surprised if they ended up going big game hunting if they're not going to move probably their best asset that they have right now. Anyway.
Do you think they go get a goalie by any chance, or is that chip sales?
I mean, you'd think with what they have right now, that should be okay. Right. I mean, I don't know Linus Ullmark, he didn't play the last game against Philadelphia, but presumably coming out of the break, you're looking at Ullmark and Reimer as your tandem. From Roderick, last one for you. How do you find the motivation to do your daily run when the temperature is in the minus?
I don't know. It's like it has been a challenge. This has been by far the coldest winter in Toronto, like not even close, since I've been doing this run streak. So it's been, even right now, like my legs feel fatigued because, just because it's so slippery out there at times, or like even uneven, not even if it's like slippery, but like there's like clumps of snow. Like you don't just settle into a kind of a rhythm and go the way I do in other times of the year. So, it's been a bit of a challenge, but I'm also almost 6 years into this thing. And weirdly, it's kind of like a ball rolling downhill. Like I don't think about it too much. I just gear up and go and get the icicles in my beard and all that. So streak is still alive. It's going to be extra tested, not with just the weather, but with the baby arriving this week. We'll see if I can get through the next few weeks and still have that streak going. But so far, so good. And, just dress. If you dress for it, it actually isn't that bad. It's not just the cold, though. I find like the snow and the slipperiness actually is the bigger deterrent for me. I mean, the straight up cold, for the most part, I can layer up and feel pretty good when I'm out there.
Does running around the hospital count, even if it's just a lap around a block?
I probably would, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, we've actually got the hospital bags packed, including mine, and I've got full set of running gear. So I plan on going for a meaningful run the day after. Obviously, I'll go early the morning before he's born, and then the day after I'll make time. But then we'll see the day after that, the day after that, the day after that, the day after that. It might come to a point where it's too much, but I try to live my life one day at a time, and so far, so good.
That's all we can really do in this life, CJ. Again, wishing you and your partner nothing but the best this week as you're about to be a father and you're about to welcome a baby into this new world. Got nothing but love for you, man.
Thanks,
best
buddy.
of luck. And it's going to be great.
It's weird, man. It's just weird. Like we were just waiting for this like massive thing to come. But this is probably my last podcast as a non-dad. So there we go. That's not even a real milestone, but it is a reminder of how soon everything's happening.
400 plus episodes as a non-father on the CJ show. Your life changes this week.
Yeah, I'm probably going to cry for the next month. So hopefully I can stop the tears long enough to, bubble out a few shows with you.
We'll be crying right there with you. Even if I'm not visibly blubbering, I'll tear. I'm not a blubberer. I'll tear a lot if I do cry, but we got you. Anyways, great work as always, CJ. Thank you to everyone who listened to today's episode. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already, and keep it locked for our next episode.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.